The blood-soaked envelope lay twisted on the wooden floor, its corners curling as if recoiling from the truth it carried. A single photo was half exposed, Sarah's face staring blankly from the image, eyes wide, smile soft and unaware. The apartment around it was silent, except for the rhythmic thump of a heartbeat. Real or imagined, it was impossible to tell. A shattered wineglass glinted beneath the table, crimson liquid pooled beside it. Outside, sirens whined, distant but drawing near. Inside, the air was still, the kind of stillness that follows screaming. A phone on the couch buzzed endlessly, its screen flashing Jake's name. Sarah stood frozen near the window, her hand trembling, her breath shallow. She didn't remember this place. She didn't remember the night. But she knew one thing: she had been the last to see him alive. What? The weight of that photo in a stranger's pocket would unravel her life in ways she couldn't yet grasp. Sarah hadn't returned to that apartment in years. But now, it was like the walls whispered her name. Everything was untouched yet unfamiliar, like someone had carefully curated a version of her past. A dusty bookshelf stood exactly how she remembered, but the photo frames on top had different faces. She took one step inside and stopped cold. There it was. A photo of her. Not as she looked now, but younger, maybe 5 years ago. She didn't own that photo. She didn't even remember it being taken. Yet here it was, in a stranger's apartment. A light flickered in the hallway behind her. She turned quickly, heart racing. No one. Just silence. But something about the air had changed. It was charged now. Loaded. Sarah whispered to herself that it had to be a mistake. But in her gut, she knew. This wasn't a case of mistaken identity. Someone had placed that photo here for her to find. She approached the photo slowly, like it might disappear if she moved too fast. Her steps made no sound on the dusty floor. The image was encased in a plain wooden frame, resting on a mantel above an extinguished fireplace. It was her, all right. Same dimples, same eyes. But there was something off. Her expression. The clothes. She had never worn that dress. And the background looked like an outdoor event she couldn't place. Sarah's hand trembled as she reached for it. Her fingers stopped just short of the frame. Something about touching it felt wrong. As if by doing so she would be confirming a reality she wasn't ready to accept. Suddenly, the front door creaked open. She spun around, heart hammering. But the doorway was empty. She turned back. She turned back. The photo was gone. She stumbled backward, eyes darting. The photo had vanished, and the frame was empty. But there had been no sound, no footsteps, no creak, nothing. She picked up the frame, her hands trembling now. Cold. As if someone had held it seconds before. Sarah looked toward the hallway again. Her instincts screamed for her to leave, but something deeper rooted her in place. She needed answers. She stepped into the hall, every light flickering above her. Dust swirled around her feet. Halfway down she paused. Another photo. Pinned to the wall with a rusted nail. It was her again, in that same dress. Only this time, her smile was gone. Her eyes, direct, unblinking, looked right at the camera. Or maybe, right at her. She reached for the photo, drawn to it like a moth to flame. The image sent shivers through her spine, her own face, unmistakably hers, but colder, disconnected. No memory accompanied the moment. No event surfaced. Just that vacant look. Her own eyes watching her from the wall. She ripped it down, hands shaking, and turned to run, but stopped. There was something written on the back. Scrawled in red ink, shaky and fast. You were never supposed to see this. Her breath caught in her throat. Sirens wailed again, closer now. She backed away slowly. Whoever had taken these photos wasn't just watching her past. They were watching her now. And they were close. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, her knuckles white around a chipped mug of untouched coffee. The photo was still clutched in her other hand, folded, the red ink barely visible through the creases. Her breath fogged slightly in the morning chill, despite the closed windows. She hadn't slept. Her eyes were sunken, her skin pale, her hair tied in a rushed knot that hadn't been touched in hours. Outside, life moved on. Cars passed, birds chirped, neighbors laughed faintly. Inside, time was locked in that hallway. She kept replaying it in her head. The photo, the handwriting, the silence. Sarah whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Jake said he had a surprise for me. This wasn't it. The words felt heavy, like she was admitting something forbidden. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. No voicemail. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Because deep down, she feared the voice on the other end might say her name. She opened Jake's last message again, scrolling through it like it might have changed overnight. Just a blurry selfie of the two of them, smiles frozen in a moment that no longer felt real. His final text read, "Can't wait to tell you. Meet me at the place." But there had never been any follow-up. No location. No time. No more Jake. She'd read too much into it the first few days. Maybe he was planning a proposal, a big reveal, something joyous. But now the photo in the stranger's apartment had turned that message into a threat wrapped in nostalgia. The phone buzzed again. This time a voicemail notification appeared. Her fingers hovered, hesitated, then tapped play. Static. Call. 1. No. Then, a voice. Soft. Male. .1. And wrong. You shouldn't be looking. Sarah dropped the phone. Her stomach twisted. That wasn't Jake's voice. The voicemail echoed in her mind as she paced the living room, the photo now lying face down on the floor. She picked it up again and studied it closer. There, on the edge of the frame, was something she'd missed before. A reflection in a window behind her younger self. It was hard to make out, but it was unmistakably a man. Standing in the background. Zinging. Watching. A figure in a hood. Faceless in shadow. Sarah's heart skipped. That wasn't Jake. She flipped the photo again. Nothing else had changed, but everything felt different now. Every photo she had, every memory, it all felt compromised. Someone had been there. Someone had been following. Watching for years. The thought rooted deep in her chest like a splinter, growing colder. She whispered, barely audible, "I was never alone." In a desperate move, Sarah gathered all her old photos from drawers, boxes, and digital folders. She laid them across the floor, rows and rows of captured smiles and posed memories. Her knees ached on the hardwood as she scanned each one. And then she saw it. The same figure. Not in all of them, but in just enough to confirm her fear. At a beach in the background. Behind a car window. Reflected in a store mirror. Always distant. Always watching. Her stomach turned. She'd never noticed it before. Never thought to look. She crawled backwards from the photos, hands trembling. Her life had been recorded, shadowed, stalked. A knock at the door startled her. 3 quick taps. Then silence. Sarah held her breath. She didn't move. She didn't speak. The doorknob twitched. She crawled to the kitchen, grabbing the largest knife she could find with shaking hands. Her breath came in shallow gasps, her body tense like a wire pulled too tight. The knock didn't come again, but the silence that followed was worse. She pressed her back to the wall, knife clenched at her side, and stared at the front door. Minutes passed. Or maybe hours. Then, a note slipped through the slot, folded neatly. She hesitated, then reached for it with trembling fingers. The paper was thick, expensive. Inside one line, "You saw what you weren't meant to. We're watching." There was no signature. No mark. Just the black ink and her rising panic. Sarah dropped the note and bolted for her bedroom. She slammed the door, locked it, and slid down against it. The knife rested in her lap. Whoa. Her eyes stayed fixed on the doorknob. Waiting. Morning came in fragments, slices of sunlight breaking through the blinds, the hum of the city faint beyond the walls. Sarah hadn't slept. Her body ached from tension, the knife still on the floor beside her. She stared at the note again, trying to decode its meaning, trying to rationalize what couldn't be rational. Her world had tilted off its axis. She decided to retrace her last day with Jake, their final moments together before he vanished. She dug through her bag, found her journal, and flipped to the entry from 2 weeks ago. Jake had taken her to the Rosemont Overlook, a quiet cliffside spot they used to visit in college. The last time they went, he'd seemed distracted. He told her, "There's something I need to tell you." But he never did. Her fingers gripped the page. That spot might hold more than memories now. It might hold answers. Sarah parked her car just off the gravel road that led to the Rosemont Overlook. Fog still clung to the trees like breath on glass. The path was narrow, winding, framed by overgrown weeds and fallen branches. Her boots crunched through the dirt as she made her way to the cliff's edge. Memories flooded her. Jake laughing, Jake skipping rocks, Jake pulling her into his coat when the wind picked up. But now, the place felt abandoned, eerie. Something crunched behind her. She turned fast, nothing but branches. Still, she moved quicker, scanning the area. Then she saw it. Half buried near the edge, a black phone, scratched and muddy. Her hands shook as she picked it up. It wasn't hers. It wasn't Jake's either. But it had photos on it. And her face was in all of them. Back in her car, she turned the phone on. It was slow to boot. The screen cracked, its battery barely holding. When it opened, a gallery app displayed only one album, titled simply, Her. She tapped it. Dozens of images. Some from afar, her walking in the city, eating at a cafe, entering her apartment. Others, from inside. Photos she had never seen, never taken. Some were clearly from her bedroom, the living room. Some were from angles that made her feel sick, taken while she slept. The final image was recent. Her, on the cliff's edge. From just minutes ago. Her hand shot to her mouth. Someone was watching her even now. She dropped the phone on the passenger seat and turned the key, heart thundering. She needed to get away. But her rearview mirror showed a figure standing on the trail, watching her car. Sarah slammed the car into reverse, gravel kicking up beneath the tires as she sped away from the trailhead. Her breath came in ragged bursts, eyes flicking to the mirror every few seconds. But the figure never moved. It just stood there until it disappeared into the fog. Back home, she locked every door, pulled the curtains tight, and collapsed into her desk chair. She connected the strange phone to her laptop. The files revealed more than photos. There were audio recordings. Her voice. Conversations she never remembered having. A clip played through the speakers. Sarah said, "I don't know how much longer I can pretend." Then Jake replied, "You don't have to." But that conversation never happened. She was certain. Her voice Jake's, stitched together? Deep fake? Edited? She didn't know. But it meant only one thing. Someone was controlling the story. She leaned back, staring at the ceiling, the static noise of her own voice replaying on loop. The sound was hers, but it wasn't her. The more she listened, the more she realized it wasn't about Jake disappearing. It was about Sarah being made into something she wasn't. Someone was rewriting her life, altering evidence, manufacturing memories. The messages, the photos, even her voice, carefully designed pieces of a narrative she didn't author. Her paranoia turned sharp. She unplugged the laptop, threw the phone in the sink, and crushed it with a hammer. Sparks flew. She didn't care. She needed truth. Real truth. Not screens. Not files. She needed to find someone who knew Jake beyond her, someone untouched by the madness. And she knew where to start. His sister, Emily. If anyone knew what Jake was hiding, it would be her. Emily lived on the outskirts of town, tucked into a quiet row of brownstones shadowed by old trees. Sarah stood at the threshold, nerves buzzing, uncertain what she was even hoping to find. Emily opened the door slowly, eyes widening at the sight of her. Sarah hadn't spoken to her since Jake vanished. Emily's voice cracked slightly as she said, "You shouldn't be here." Sarah stepped inside anyway. The air was warm but tight, filled with the scent of dust and incense. Sarah didn't wait long. She pulled the folded note from her pocket and placed it on the table. "Do you know what this means?" Emily didn't answer at first. Her eyes went glassy. Then she whispered, "I told him not to drag you into this." Her tone was brittle, exhausted. Sarah stared at her. "Drag me into what?" Emily looked away. Whatever this was, she knew more than she'd ever let on. Emily sat down heavily, her fingers trembling as she reached for the note. She didn't read it. She didn't need to. She stared at the table instead, like the wood itself might offer comfort. "Jake was being watched," she finally said. "They started years ago. Not the police. Not anyone official. I don't know who they were, but he called them the listeners. He thought they were recording everything." Sarah sat across from her, heart pounding. Emily continued, "They made him paranoid. He kept journals, hard copies. Not digital. Said they couldn't manipulate paper." Sarah whispered, "He said he had a surprise for me. That day, before he disappeared." Emily closed her eyes. "He wanted to show you the truth. But he vanished before he could." Her voice dropped. "They made sure of it." Sarah's breath hitched. Her brother hadn't been lost. He'd been silenced. Sarah demanded to see the journals. Emily hesitated, but finally stood and opened a small cabinet behind the couch. From inside, she pulled a shoebox full of leather-bound notebooks, each labeled by date and year. Emily placed it gently in Sarah's lap. "Duh. He wouldn't have wanted me to," she said, "but I think you deserve to know." Sarah opened the top journal and flipped through Jake's tight, slanted handwriting. Page after page detailed odd events, voices over static, missing time, strangers who appeared in the background of photos, and then vanished. But one name kept recurring: Muriel. Sarah frowned. "Muriel?" Emily shook her head. "He said it was the name they used to talk to each other. Not out loud. Just inside." Sarah looked up sharply. The air suddenly felt thinner. This wasn't surveillance. This was something else. Something far stranger. One journal contained a photo taped to the page. It showed Sarah and Jake years ago, standing outside a cabin in the woods. But Sarah couldn't remember being there. The cabin seemed wrong. The trees too symmetrical, the sky too pale. Jake had written beneath it, "This is where they cross over." Sarah pointed at it. "Where is this?" Emily's lips tightened. "That's where he was going to take you. He said they wouldn't follow him there." She paused. "But I think they did." Sarah felt a chill pass through her. She studied the photo again, now noticing the faint shape of a figure in the background. Not a person. Something distorted. Tall. Danged. Blurred. Like it didn't belong. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "I need to go there." Emily reached out, gripping her wrist. "Then promise you'll come back." Sarah nodded, but something in her heart knew, not everything returns. That night, Sarah packed a bag with only the essentials: a flashlight, the journals, an old map, and a Polaroid of her and Jake. She drove for hours, the city lights falling away behind her until only the stars remained. The road narrowed to dirt, then to grass. Finally, she stood before the tree line, exactly like the photo. The cabin was deeper in. She felt it. Not just directionally, but in her bones. As she stepped into the woods, a sound echoed behind her. Not footsteps. A voice. Barely audible. Like a whisper through the trees. Sarah. Her name, stretched and fragile. She turned, flashlight sweeping through darkness. No one. Just silence. Then again. Sarah. Wall. She moved faster. Branches clawed at her jacket. The path twisted unnaturally. Something wanted her to find it. And something else wanted her to stop. Sarah pushed deeper into the woods, the flashlight trembling in her grip. The trees grew unnaturally straight, their trunks pale and barkless, reaching like bones into the sky. The silence was unnatural. No wind, no insects, only her breathing and the soft crunch of leaves beneath her boots. Then, ahead, she saw it. The cabin. Exactly as in the photo. Weathered, ancient, almost sinking into the earth. She approached slowly. Her hand hovered over the rusted doorknob. Before she could touch it, the door creaked open on its own. Faint warmth escaped, along with the scent of wood smoke and something older, dust, memory, and something faintly metallic. She stepped inside. The room was lit by candles. A figure stood in the far corner, unmoving, back turned. Sarah whispered, "Jake?" The figure turned. And it was him. But not the Jake she remembered. Not exactly. Jake's face was thinner, paler, his eyes sunken but lucid. He looked at her like she was both a memory and a ghost. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. Sarah stepped forward, trembling. "They said you were gone. That you disappeared." Jake nodded slowly. "I did? But not in the way you think." He gestured to the walls, lined with pages, photos, diagrams, strings connecting names and symbols. He had built a map of madness. Or a map of truth. Sarah stepped closer to the wall. "You knew they were following me." Jake's voice cracked. "I tried to stop it. I told them no. But they didn't need my permission." Her hands trembled at her sides. Jake looked at her with sorrow. "You were always the target, Sarah. I was just the entry point. They only needed me to get to you." Sarah's chest tightened as she stared at the wall. So many images of her. Dates. Locations. Conversations transcribed, word for word. They documented everything. Jake moved closer, his voice low. "Muriel isn't a person. It's a program. A network. An observer. They watch, record, alter. And sometimes, they rewrite." Sarah turned to him, her voice trembling. "Then what's real?" Jake looked pained. "I don't know anymore. They twisted my memories. I forgot things. Important things. Like you." He paused. "I left because I thought I could stop it from growing. But now I think I only led it closer." Sarah stepped back, dizzy. She looked at one photo on the wall. Her, asleep, from last week. She hadn't been alone in her house. She hadn't been alone for years. And she hadn't even known. A sudden sound snapped through the room, a low hum, mechanical and growing louder. Jake's eyes widened. "They found us," he whispered. Sarah spun around. Candles flickered violently. Shadows stretched unnaturally long along the floor. Jake grabbed her arm. "There's a back way. Hurry." They ran through a narrow hallway, into a side room. There was a trapdoor. Jake yanked it open. "Get inside." Sarah hesitated. "I'm not leaving without you." Jake stared at her, jaw trembling. "You have to. If they catch us both, it's over." The hum was now a drone, pressing on their skulls. Lights began to blink behind the cabin walls, red, cold, artificial. Sarah dropped into the crawl space. Jake looked down at her. "Don't forget who you are." Then he slammed the trapdoor shut. Silence. In the suffocating dark, Sarah lay still, heart hammering in her ears. Above, muffled noises, shuffling, voices not quite human, something dragging. She pressed a hand over her mouth to stay silent. Then, a scream. Jake's. It was short. Cut off. Her body froze, paralyzed by helplessness. Minutes passed. Then, hours. Silence again. Finally, she pushed the trapdoor open. The cabin was cold, empty. The map was gone. The candles burned out. Not a trace of Jake remained. Sarah stood alone in the void of what had happened. Something new had been left on the table. A single photo. Her face. Blank expression. Behind her, in the image, a screen. And on that screen, another version of her, in real time, staring back. The watchers had taken him. But they weren't done with her. Not yet. Sarah walked for miles, the photo clutched in her hand like a wound that wouldn't close. The forest behind her felt heavier now, like it had swallowed something, and wouldn't let go. Her boots sank into soft earth, the map of her memory fraying with every step. When she finally reached her car, the windows were fogged from within. She hesitated. Inside, everything was exactly as she left it, except for the glove box. It hung open, and inside was a small recorder. She pressed play. Static at first. Then Jake's voice. "If you found this, they've taken me. But they can't erase you, Sarah. Not yet. You're the last thread. The last proof. You have to tell someone. You have to show them." Her grip tightened on the device. She still had time. Not to undo what had been done, but to make sure the next thread wasn't cut. She drove in silence, the morning sun rising behind her like a quiet witness. Each mile felt heavier than the last. Sarah didn't go home. She couldn't. Instead, she drove straight to the local precinct, recorder in her pocket, journals on the passenger seat. At the front desk, her voice cracked as she said, "I need to report a disappearance." But she knew it wasn't just Jake. It was herself. It was pieces of her life shaved away in quiet shadows. The officer took notes, politely detached, until Sarah dropped the journal onto the desk. Page after page. Names, dates, coordinates. Photos. Photos. She leaned in and whispered, "They're rewriting people." The officer blinked slowly, confused. But she didn't stop. She placed the recorder next, then her photo. Her voice steadied. "You don't have to believe me. Just keep it safe. If I disappear next, this is my trail." By evening, she returned to her apartment. The door was exactly as she'd left it, locked, undisturbed. But her body told a different story. Every movement felt foreign now, like she was walking through a simulation. She unplugged every device in the apartment. Laptop, all. Phone, ding, TV, TV. She taped over her webcam. Closed every curtain. Then, she set the journals in a box, wrapped them in plastic, and buried them beneath the floorboards behind the closet. She needed something untouched. Something hidden. As she finished, she caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror. She looked older, tired, but her eyes were sharp. Present. I. Her reflection looked back at her the way it used to. For now. She turned the mirror toward the wall and whispered, "Not this time." That night, she dreamed of static, of being inside a frame she couldn't escape. In the dream, voices called her name, but none of them were Jake. She awoke with a start, drenched in sweat. The clock blinked 3:33. She stood and walked to the window, pulling the curtain aside. Across the street, under the flickering lamplight, a man stood motionless, dressed in gray, face obscured, not moving, not leaving, just watching. Sarah didn't blink. She didn't hide. Instead, she stared back. Let him see her. Let them all see. She raised her phone slowly and snapped a photo. Flash. Light flared across the window. When she looked again, the man was gone. But she didn't delete the image. This time, she would be the observer. This time, she would remember. Morning broke, quiet and slow. Sarah stood on the rooftop of her building, the city stretching around her like a breathing organism. She held the photo she took last night in one hand, Jake's journal in the other. She didn't know what would come next, if they would try again, if they would erase her completely. But she wasn't afraid. Not anymore. She had seen them. She had lived through it. And she had proof. She placed the photo and the journal into a sealed envelope and mailed it to a reporter Jake had once trusted. She didn't write a return address. Let them come, she thought. She was no longer running. She turned toward the sun as it rose, warm against her skin. And for the first time in days, she breathed fully. She was still here. She still remembered. Sarah walked through the city streets, the world moving around her like it always had. Cars honking, strangers rushing by, coffee shops humming with routine. But something in her had changed. She saw things differently now. Faces in crowds that lingered a second too long. Storefront reflections that twitched when she didn't move. She carried a camera now, always on her shoulder. Not for art. For evidence. Watching back. Recording what watched her. The note from the cabin stayed folded in her jacket pocket. Softened by time, its threat now a reminder. Not of fear, but of purpose. She stopped at a crosswalk and caught a reflection in a shop window. It blinked before she did. Just slightly. But she smiled anyway. Let them see. Let them know she saw it too. And this time, she wasn't afraid of being remembered. She began writing everything down. Not just in journals but in letters, unmailed messages to herself. Memories she didn't trust a memory. Each page, an anchor. She stored them in odd places, hidden in books at libraries, left beneath benches in parks, taped under cafe tables. Pieces of a map only she understood. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was insurance. Resistance. If they ever came again, she would have a trail, breadcrumbs for someone to follow. She didn't care if people called her crazy. She'd rather be crazy and alive than sane and lost. Her voice, her image, her history, it all belonged to her now. Sarah sat on a park bench under a tree and folded a letter neatly. She smiled at the name on the envelope. It simply read, "Future me." That night, she returned to the overlook, Rosemont. The same cliff where Jake had vanished, where she'd found the phone. But now, there was no fog. No watchers. Just wind and sky. She stood at the edge, the city lights faint in the distance. She didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, she spoke aloud, not to the wind, but to Jake. You were right. They don't erase with violence. They erase with silence. With doubt. But I remember. She pulled the last photo from her pocket, the one from the cabin, the one of her with the screen behind her. She burned it. Watched it curl, ash drifting into the dark. There were things they could never take from her. Not anymore. Her voice was quiet, but firm. I'm still here, Jake. And they'll never get all of me. In the days that followed, nothing happened. No knocks. No watchers. No messages. For the first time, the silence didn't feel like a trap. It felt like choice. But Sarah didn't let her guard down. She continued her routine, documenting, tracking, writing. She joined online forums under aliases, found others with similar stories. People who had lost time, who had seen glitches, who remembered what they weren't supposed to. She wasn't alone anymore. There were others. A network growing in the shadows. No leader. No manifesto. Just people refusing to forget. Sarah read their posts with quiet hope. The listeners weren't just watching anymore. They were being watched. On the final page of her newest journal, Sarah wrote one sentence. The hardest part of surviving isn't escaping. It's remembering. She closed the cover gently and placed the book beside the others, stacked neatly on a hidden shelf behind the wall panel. Outside, the sky was soft with morning. A new day. She stepped out onto her balcony, barefoot, her face tilted toward the sun. The warmth touched her skin like a promise. She didn't know what would happen tomorrow. Maybe they'd try again. Maybe they'd send another version. But it wouldn't matter. Because Sarah knew who she was now. And no one, not them, not anyone, could take that from her. She exhaled slowly, whispering to the wind, "Let them watch."